Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video I have a Game Week 9 wildcard draft. I know we've got a 2-week international break and you don't need to lock in your wildcards yet, but for those of you that are on your wildcard, maybe want to catch some of the price changes and just start thinking about what your draft may look like, I thought I'd do this video for you, and hopefully it's still useful for those of you that aren't wildcarding because you can see the sort of players that I think we should be targeting from Game Week 9 onwards. If you're enjoying the content here on this channel, please do remember to like, comment and subscribe. But without further ado, let's jump to today's video. So guys, before we jump into looking at the Game Week 9 wildcard draft, just wanted to really quickly talk about Fanslide. If you guys have been watching the videos and streams on my channel all season, I've been talking about and playing Fanslide. I absolutely love this game. It's completely free to play, live and interactive fantasy football. So during the game, you basically have 3 slots and you slide players in and out of those slots at any one time. And you can only own each player for up to 20 minutes in the game. So you've basically got to decide, as you can see here, like Rodri, Ake and Walker, when do you think the players in that game will do particularly well and when don't you? So if you think, for example, if City are playing, you think City will keep a clean sheet in the first 20 minutes, you put in some of their defenders. If you think City will score goals in the first 20, you put in the likes of Haaland and De Bruyne. So you've almost got a time when you own them. And it's great for if you're watching a game. It's quite nice. Whilst you're watching it, you think, oh, I can see that player getting into some good positions. They're doing really well. I'm going to put them in my team at that point. And you get points for everything from sort of interceptions, goals, defensive headers, assists, everything you can imagine. You can get points for. And you can also get negative points as well. So it's completely free to play, really, really fun. There are paid tournaments on the site if you want to. So it is 18 plus. Please do be gamble aware. If you do decide to enter the paid for tournaments, obviously only enter as much you can afford to lose. But I've just been playing the free versions and it's been really, really fun. And the best thing about this is during the international break, Fanslide do have the international games as some of the tournaments as well. So you can play the England versus Italy game and the England versus Germany game. So whilst you're watching the England games, you can choose which players you want to own. And it's just a fun thing to do whilst FPL is maybe not on. And then when the Premier League games come back, you can continue to play Fanslide as well. So there will be a link in the description. What that link will allow you to do is to join Fanslide, but also it will allow you to join my league as well. So it will do 2 in 1. If you download using that link, you'll enter my league and you'll also get to play the game as well. I'll probably be playing the games over the international break and fingers crossed we do pretty well with it. So guys, in order to get this out for you when the football ends on Sunday, I've had to start recording this during the Everton-West Ham game. It's not been a particularly great game. It's currently 0-0. So I've got one player left to play, that is Bowen. So depending if Bowen gets anything, that could change my rank. But just to give you an idea about how my Game Week 8 wildcard went, I definitely do not regret playing it. My team that I did have would have scored about sort of 35 to 40 points. And the team that I now have is going to score probably between 60 and 65, depending on how many points Bowen gets. And that's pushed me up from about 29k to about 22k at the time of recording. So again, if Bowen gets anything, it could push me up towards the top 10k. If he doesn't, I'll probably settle around sort of 20 to 25k. And I'm delighted with that because remember, a Game Week 8 wildcard, it wasn't just for Game Week 8. It wasn't a free hit. And I've set my team up really well moving forward. And when I actually compare my Game Week 8 wildcard to my Game Week 9 wildcard that I'm building here, there aren't that many differences. So I feel like I've been able to attack Game Week 8, get rid of my team, which had about 7 players blanking, and also set myself up really nice from Game Week 9 moving forward. So that's how my wildcard did. All in all, I'm pretty happy with it. If you wildcarded in Game Week 8, let me know how you got on down below. So this team is currently in a 3-4-3, and I've really thought about how, with a Game Week 9 wildcard, you can get ahead of the curve and maybe get ahead of those that wildcarded in 8. So I'm thinking, what am I jealous of? What could you do on your Game Week 9 wildcard that would put you ahead of the people that wildcarded the week before? So there are maybe a couple of risks in this team, but there are also a lot of players that, again, Game Week 8 wildcarders would have had as well. This team currently has 0.1 million in the bank. It's difficult with team value because it's not really your team value that matters, it's your selling value. So my current team value is 101.9, but I sold a lot of assets that I had money tied up in. So it's difficult to try and tell, but basically I've got 0.1 million in the bank with this current team. So starting in goal, I have got Gaeta. Now it's not a great fixture in Game Week 9. That being said, if Pickford's not back, and I don't know at this stage whether Pickford will be back for Game Week 9, you could still go with the Gaeta and Begovic combination that I spoke about in Game Week 8. And you could start Begovic against, I think it's Southampton in Game Week 9, and then bring Gaeta in Game Week 10 when they play Leeds, then Leicester, and the fixtures start to clean up a little bit for them. So if Pickford's not back, you could do that. And to be honest, you could potentially play either Ward or Everson, whoever you think is going to start. Now, Ward has been the starting keeper for Leicester. It surely is only a matter of time until Everson comes in because every time he plays, he looks so good. And to be honest, I'm not saying Ward is a bad keeper because in the past, especially for Wales, he's been fantastic. But this season for Leicester, he's been shocking. So you feel like that's only a matter of time. So maybe if you go for Gaeta and Everson, maybe you start Everson or you start Ward, one of the Leicester keepers against Nottingham Forest at home. It's up to you whether you want to trust the Leicester defence. But I guess what I'm saying is you don't necessarily have to play Gaeta this week even if you select him in your team. But I just think with the fixtures that Palace have coming up from game week 10 onwards, I would have at least 2 Palace players in my wildcard. Probably 3, to be honest. I just think the fixtures are that great. So Gaeta has got the nod over Pope. I don't mind Pope, though. I think Pope's still a fantastic option. And you could even go for the likes of a Fabianski if you wanted to, if you potentially want to target those West Ham fixtures too. I have got Trippier in there. Yes, I haven't got Pope, but I still think it is worth trying to target that Newcastle defence a little bit. The reason that I like Trippier maybe instead of Pope, if you're only going to go for one, is you can rotate Trippier out for the trickier fixtures. So they have Manchester United in 11, I believe, and then Tottenham in 13. So in those fixtures, you can rotate Trippier out, whereas if you have Pope, you probably can't. So I still think it's worth targeting the Newcastle defence, but maybe you don't need the double up, especially as the fixtures aren't as great as they are for the likes of Crystal Palace. And then I do have the 2 very attacking players, the premium defenders, you could say, in Reece James and Cancelo. I think Reece James is going to be fantastic value under Graham Potter. He's going to almost definitely be playing in either a right back or a right wing back slot. I can't see him playing at centre back too often for Potter. And if he does play at right wing back, as we saw in the Cup, he does get very, very far forward. We've seen it with like Trossard in the past. We saw the Sterling playing a similar sort of role on the left. But he does like his wing backs to get very, very high if he plays a back 3/back 5. So I think by all accounts, Reece James is going to be great value. And the fixtures coming up really aren't that bad for Chelsea up until the World Cup too. I do have Cancelo in this team. I've played around with a wildcard, but I actually have Trent instead of Cancelo. So I think you probably don't want both. I just think with the amount of value we have in a lot of the mid-price midfielders and probably wanting 3 strikers, I think it's difficult to get Cancelo and Trent into a wildcard draft. So what I'm probably thinking is you probably have to choose one or the other. To be honest, both Cancelo and Trent have pretty rough fixtures over the next 3 or 4. The thing that maybe makes me lean in favour of Cancelo first is I think they're slightly better, the fixtures for Cancelo. And I also just think Cancelo's playing in the better defence. So I think clean sheets are more likely for Cancelo. And I just about prefer the fixtures, mainly just due to the fact that City are just fantastic defensively as well. So I'm leaning towards Cancelo for that reason. The thing that would put me in favour of Trent is, of course, the blank in Game Week 12 for Cancelo. So in Game Week 12, you've either got a bench Cancelo or you sell him for Trent anyway. So these are some things you might want to think about. I think the fact that like Thiago and Matip are back for Liverpool might make me start to favour Trent again. I just don't think realistically, unless you really sacrifice that front line or you drop the likes of Reece James, which I just don't want to do, I feel like you've probably got to choose one of Cancelo or Trent. At the moment, I'm just leaning Cancelo, but by the end of the international break, I might well go back to Trent, in my opinion there. So that is the current back line. Only 3 at the back, 2 decent defenders on the bench, which we'll discuss a bit later. Let's move on to the midfield next, though. I think a lot of the defence largely picks itself, and I think the same with the forward line as well. Where this draft will maybe differentiate from a lot of the drafts that you've built or you see other content creators built might be the midfield. There are especially 2 picks in here, which I think are maybe a lot of people would consider not having. So let's start with maybe the obvious picks. I think Maddison's an obvious pick. That isn't a knee-jerk response in response to his goal in Game Week 8. I had him in my Game Week 8 wildcard. I just said with the fixtures coming up, how talismanic Maddison is, the fact that he's on a lot of set pieces as well, I just think he's a great option. And he took so many shots against Spurs. He created, I think he had something like 6 or 7 shots. He created like 3 or 4 chances. He looked absolutely fantastic, had one of the highest expected goal involvements in Game Week 8. And yes, Spurs haven't been great defensively, but if he can do the likes of that against Spurs, what can he maybe do against Forest at home? I just think it's such a good fixture. And if you haven't looked at the fixtures, they then play Bournemouth in Game Week 10, Leicester. So I just think over the next 2 weeks, Maddison is a fantastic option. Arguably a differential captaincy if you're feeling brave. For everything that we've said about Leicester defensively, and let's be honest, they've been really, really, really poor defensively, not only this season, but last season as well. Maddison continues to get returns and Leicester continue to score goals. So even though they haven't been great attacking-wise this season, I think with the fixtures coming up, with how good Maddison is, with what we saw last season from Maddison too, which was a much bigger sample size to look at, I just think he's a great option on the wildcard. And for me, he was a no-brainer on the Game Week 8 wildcard. I was always going to start him. As I said, I started him ahead of Andreas. And I just think from Game Week 9 onwards, you're going to want Maddison in your team. So he's a no-brainer for me. And then I would say it's almost another no-brainer for me to go for Zaha. I just think with Maddison and Zaha, like I say, they're so talismanic. They'll get a large percentage of the team's goals. So even if Palace and Leicester don't score that many goals, when they do, you're expecting Zaha or Maddison to be involved in a large percentage of those. And yes, it's not great this week, right? This week I've got Zaha against James. It's not particularly ideal, but James could get an attacking return against pretty much anyone there. And I just feel like you can't look too short term. And I'm not going to not pick James or not pick Zaha just because they clash in Game Week 9. So for that reason, I think Zaha's an obvious one. He's on penalty. He's going to play every minute. The fixtures coming up, especially from Game Week 10, he's got Leeds, then Leicester. They continue to be pretty good. I think he's got Wolves in Game Week 12, obviously when we need pretty much all of our players because Man City and Arsenal blank. So for all of those reasons, I think Maddison and Zaha as 2 talismanic figures at a good price points. I'd be picking those in Game Week 9 wildcard. And for me, I'm starting to think in my wildcard about how I can start to get Maddison into my team. I've got Harvey Barnes in there. That spot there for me is whoever you want. And I think this is the spot where a lot of the other players for me sort of pick themselves. And when you go with a certain structure, you just have very obvious players at certain price points. I feel like this midfield spot will depend on which premiums you go for and what your team value is. I don't think you necessarily should follow me here and go for Harvey Barnes. I just think have a fun punt in that spot. You could keep Martinelli if you think Arsenal are going to be great. I just think with the fixtures they've got coming up in the next three, they've got like Liverpool, they've got the blank, and Spurs, Liverpool, and a blank, I believe, in the next three. They've got Leeds in and amongst that, and also Southampton and Forest, the other side of the blank. But I just wonder if you can drop your Arsenal assets, however good they looked against Brentford today, and they have been great this season. I wonder if you could drop your Arsenal assets and start to bring them back in from game week 13 onwards. That's something to think about. But you could just keep Martinelli in that spot. You could go for the likes of Paqueta if you want to. You could just drop it all the way down to like a Bailey alongside Andreas. You could really go for whoever you want in that spot. But for me, I'm looking at the next two fixtures of Forest and Bournemouth. And like I said, for everything we think about Leicester defensively, I think they will score goals in those two games. The only slight concern, I suppose, is I don't think Barnes is like 1,000% nailed. I think he's pretty much as nailed as you would hope for. There is a small chance they've got Daka, Iheanacho, Vardy, Maddison. There's a small chance that he misses one of the two games. But I just think that Leicester need points, Leicester need goals, and I think Barnes is in their favoured 11. So I think I will take a punt on that. And I just like I like the look of that double Leicester attack against Forest and Bournemouth. I think that could be fun. But like I said, that spot there, let me know down below who you would have in that spot. I've got up to about 7 million for that spot, and I feel like it's just a fun punt on whoever you think could do well over the next 2 weeks. I do have Salah in my team, and I have got the armband on Salah as well. I know this will be controversial for a lot. I just think against a Potterless Brighton, it's a great fixture this week, and I don't think there's another standout captaincy. Yes, Haaland could absolutely tear Manchester United to pieces, but from everything I've seen of Manchester United recently, we're still struggling going forward, and I'm a Manchester United fan, not a particularly biased one, I will admit. We're not doing great going forward, but we have looked a lot better defensively. So I don't think there's necessarily that many goals in that game for City. And I just feel like Salah could be a really nice differential captaincy against the Potterless Brighton. The other reason that I like having Salah in place is from game week 12, you're going to want Salah. So I think everyone that's wildcarded previously or sold Salah is thinking in game week 12, when Man City and Arsenal blank, they're probably going to sell their second premium asset and get Salah in and captain him against West Ham. So I think you arguably have one of the best captaincy options this week. You then have probably the best captaincy option in game week 12 as well. And if you're thinking you're going to captain a player twice over 4 weeks, it probably makes sense to just start with them in your wildcard. So for those reasons, I do currently have Salah in here. You could quite easily go for Heung-min Son, who looks absolutely ridiculous coming off the bench in game week 8. I don't mind that. You could just keep De Bruyne in there and just leave money in the bank to go back to Salah. I do think it's absolutely critical, though, if you're in a game week 9 wildcard or a game week 10 wildcard, you think about a way to get Salah back in game week 12 that's not going to cost you too much. And I think the fact that he doesn't blank this week now, obviously game week 8, it was difficult to justify picking Salah. I think this week, it's not difficult to justify. I think you pick him against Brighton, you then captain against Brighton, maybe captain in game week 12 as well if he looks okay over the next 3 fixtures. And I think you'll be that's where you can get a little bit ahead of game week 8 wildcarders. Because all of us that wildcarded in 8 probably won't have Salah. And then we're going to have to take transfers, probably a -4 in game week 12 to get Salah back in. So I think you're not only getting ahead on a player, you're also getting ahead on your transfers as well. So that's the reason for that midfield 4. There are a lot of players that I've sort of missed out here. Martinelli, Bowen. Like I said, you could pick a Bailey in here. Andreas is on the bench, which we'll discuss. You could even go for a 5-man midfield. And I think Son and De Bruyne are fantastic options. I just think I would just about favour Salah, like I said, just due to captaincy in both 9 and game week 12. But let me know down below if you're on a game week 9 wildcard, have you got the king in your team? So moving on to the attack and the bench, again, some really tricky decisions to be had here. And I can definitely understand justification for going against some of the players I've picked and also going for some of the players that I've omitted from this draft. I think Haaland stays for now. Like I said, you could even captain him in game week 9 if you wanted to. I probably will captain him in game week 9 just because my second premium is Kane, and I'm not necessarily sure I trust Leicester quite enough to captain Maddison. So I'll probably captain Haaland in 9. I'm just thinking if I had full choice, if I were on a free hit or a wildcard, I'd probably give the armband to Salah myself. But maybe we'll discuss that closer to the game week 9 wildcard deadline. Of course, anything could happen over the international break, players getting injured, different things happening with the structure of our team. So for now, I would still have Haaland, but maybe not give him the armband if I had full choice of all of the players. I've still got Mitrovic in here. Slightly disappointing in game week 8, but of course, he's not going to score every single week. No one does that. Even Haaland will eventually blank, right? So we're not expecting him to score every week. I know it was frustrating, the fact that they put 3 goals past Forest and Mitrovic wasn't involved at all. These games happen in FPL, and I still think moving forward with his underlying data, the eye test, how nailed he is, playing 90 minutes every single game, on penalties too, I still think Mitrovic is the second best striker in the game at the moment alongside Haaland. So despite what we saw in 8, I would still be going with Haaland and Mitrovic. then that third spot is so tricky because I think you could go for Tony, you could go for Isak, you could go for Solanke, or you could go for Kane and drop Salah down to a cheaper midfielder. You could go for a Son if you want to go for a premium, or you could go for an even cheaper midfielder and spread the funds a little bit more like I have with a 2 premium draft. So there are so many options in that spot. For me, the reason I've gone Tony is predominantly the fixture in Game Week 9. He plays against Bournemouth. And I just feel like up until sort of 16, 17, when we have our unlimited transfers over the World Cup, Tony's probably got the best fixtures over that long spell. I think Isak's got Manchester United away and Tottenham away up till Game Week 13. I also wasn't that impressed by Newcastle or Isak. Of course, it's great to know that when Wilson's not there, Isak's on penalties. But Wilson will be coming back sooner rather than later, potentially from Game Week 9 onwards. So I don't think Isak will hold on to pens when Wilson's back, assuming they both start. I think also once Wilson's back, there's a very strong chance that Isak is pushed out to the left or to the right. And they stick with that sort of 4-3-3 formation that Isak plays on the wing. So we don't really know how they're going to look when Wilson comes back in. And I just think you've lost what is probably the best game for Newcastle, which is Bournemouth at home in 8. And I feel like, again, if you're looking at ways that you can maybe get ahead of Game Week 9 wildcarders, very few of us will probably have Tony against Bournemouth in Game Week 9. And I just think that he still looks great. His underlying data is great. And in a similar way to Mitrovic, he's nailed for 90 minutes every game. He's on penalties. He's also on some free kicks as well. I just think he's a really nice option. If I weren't going to go for Tony, though, I think Isak is fine. And I also think dropping all the way down to Solanke is fine as well. I've not been that impressed by Bournemouth. He's probably not going to get you as many goals as the likes of Isak, Tony, Kane, etc., of course. But will he be value at 5.7? Arguably he will, for the same reasons. Nailed, 90 minutes, on penalties. Also, if Bournemouth are going to score, Solanke is usually involved in that, or at least involved in the majority of those goals. So let me know, again, if you are on Wildcard, what is your current front three looking like? I would still be on a 3-striker formation. I just think they're great value up until the World Cup. For me, Tony just about gets the nod as the third striker. If we go down to the bench, like I said, I've got Everson at the moment. That's because I do think he'll take the number 1 spot at some point if we continue to see Ward being so poor. Regardless, though, I think I'd just be happy playing Gaeta every week, if not. So again, you might want to start Ward, Everson, Begovic, etc. ahead of Gaeta if you think they're going to start and you don't back Gaeta to get a clean sheet. But when I think about the fact I don't have any Chelsea attackers anyway, maybe I just back it to be a relatively cagey affair against Chelsea and hope that Gaeta makes a lot of saves and gets a clean sheet. It is at home, it's at Selhurst Park, so maybe Gaeta could get something there. And like I said, then you've got him in place from Game Week 10. I do have Andreas on the bench. Yes, Bailey could be a decent option. I just think that you don't know when you're going to need your 5th midfielder. I don't know when I'm going to need Andreas. Do I need him this week? Maybe. If I do, I just feel like you can't rely on Bailey starting every game, whereas I would be very shocked if Andreas is ever dropped from that Fulham team. So I just feel like due to security of starts, he's also on a lot of set pieces. He still looks really attacking. He could have easily scored in Game Week 8. I still think I would have Andreas ahead of Bailey. Maybe the interesting inclusion here is Kilman. Now, Wolves' data has actually been really good. Of course, Man City put 3 past them because that's Man City and that's what they do. And yes, Collins being sent off is not ideal. But the reason that Kilman is currently in there is Wolves rotate really nicely with Newcastle. So in Game Week 11, Trippier plays Manchester United away, and then Game Week 13, he plays Tottenham away. In those 2 fixtures, Kilman has Nottingham Forest at home and Leicester at home. So 2 home fixtures, really nice fixtures in there as well. And like I said, Wolves are actually a pretty decent defence. They don't concede many goals. Also, in Game Week 12, again, when you're going to need most of your players because Man City and Arsenal both blank, you have him against Crystal Palace away. Yes, that is a bit of a clash with Zaha, but you can at least play him in that and hope that he maybe gets something. So for those reasons, I just think the weeks that you're going to need him, and because it rotates nicely with Trippier, I do quite like the idea of a Wolves defender. If I wasn't going to go for Kilman, I would probably go all the way down to Patterson. He continues to look really advanced. He continues to look good with respect to his attacking data. And also, Everton have been pretty tight at the back. Again, I'm recording this during the West Ham-Everton game. It's 0-0 at half-time. And by all accounts, Everton look very solid again. So maybe Patterson at 4.1 is a better idea than Kilman because you're going to save 0.4 million on him as well. So I'd probably go Kilman or Patterson in that spot. And then I do have Mark Gehi. Now, that is a double up with Gaeta. I do understand that. But I just think with the fixtures and with how good Palace were defensively last season, I don't mind that double up. The other person that you could go for in that spot is Fofana if you think he's going to start under Potter. Of course, he was benched in Potter's first game, but the fact that they spent so much money on him, the fact that he is probably in their best sort of 2 or 3 centre-backs, I would expect him to play more games than he misses. So maybe you go for Fofana in that final spot. Basically, those final 2 defenders, I don't really mind who you pick. I think it's justification to pick a wide array of different defenders. So that is the current wildcard draft. Like I said, 0.1 million in the bank. I do have pretty decent team value, so you might not be able to afford exactly this. If you can't afford this, I think the obvious place to downgrade is probably that Barnes spot and just go for anyone from sort of 5.5 to 7 million, however much you can afford. Outside of that, I don't see any other obvious places to downgrade, apart from maybe downgrading Salah. But I just think you're going to want to leave money in the bank there just in case you want to go back to him. So this is my wildcard draft. Give it a rating out of 10 down below. Let me know what you would change. I'm just going to jump over quickly to Fantasy Football Hub now and look at how this looks for future game weeks as well as this specific game week upcoming. So guys, I am using the Fantasy Football Hub My Team feature. As always, we have partnered up with Fantasy Football Hub for the season. There is a link down below for 30% off from Fantasy Football Hub. As little as £2, 10 pence per month, you can get access to pretty much every feature on the site. It will be absolutely perfect for aiding you with your wildcard drafting because it not only allows you to look at fixtures, projected points, you've got your live rank on there as an example, but you also can look ahead to future game weeks as well. So I highly advise using this during the international break if you're wildcarding, and you can get access to that using the link down below in the description. So what I've done is I've plugged in this wildcard draft, and I'm just going to go through and show you how it looks over the upcoming game weeks to show you that it is well set up for future weeks as well. We are ranked at a 98% team rating, 89% game week rating. If I actually captain Haaland for this week, who they believe is the best captaincy option, that shoots up to 99%. So by all accounts, both myself and the Fantasy Football Hub algorithm both think this is a pretty good wildcard team. So this is how we set up, remember, for game week 9. We're just going to skip ahead to game week 10 to just show you, again, you basically keep the team exactly the same. And unless you have any major issues or injuries with your team, you don't really need to make any transfers in game week 10 either, because you've got Zaha in place, you've got Gaeta in place, you've got your double Leicester against Bournemouth, you've got the best captaincy option that week in Haaland against Southampton at home. The team looks really good, and you've even got the likes of Andreas against West Ham on the bench, Mark Guehi against Leeds, so you've got some really good options in there. And again, unless something crops up, you're unlikely to need to make a transfer in game week 10, which means you'd go into game week 11 with 2 free transfers. But once again, I don't see any obvious things you would want to do. I've actually got the armband on Mitrovic here because he's got the highest projected points. But at this stage, maybe you decide to bring in Son if you wanted to captain him this week against Everton for Salah. But I just think you're going to want Salah then back in for game week 12, and I think he's probably the best captaincy option. So you have a few different options here. You can basically just respond to whatever's happening in the game at the moment. Like I said, in this week, Kilman comes in against Nottingham Forest at home, and I've actually dropped Trippier to the bench against Manchester United away. But if you wanted to, you could quite easily play Trippier and keep Kilman on the bench. This is obviously the week where Manchester City play Liverpool, so naturally your game week rating is going to be lower than it is in other weeks. But again, the team still looks really, really nice. And then in game week 12, when Manchester City and Arsenal blank, because you've got no Arsenal assets and you only have 2 City assets, you can get out a full 11, which looks really strong, plus Kilman as your first sub here. And you could even play Kilman ahead of Andreas if you wanted to. So the team, once again, is really well set up for what I think others might struggle with as a blank game week. And again, I've made no transfers here. You'd have at least 3 or 4 free transfers by this point to make your team stronger. You have the best captaincy option this week in Salah. The only thing you need to consider is, are you going to want Trent back in? Now, if you wanted to, and I think this will be the plan for a lot of people, this week, you could maybe take out Harvey Barnes if he doesn't look like he's starting, or take out one of your other options, maybe Tony against Chelsea. You could do, like, for example, Tony down to Solanke as an option. I'll just show you some of the things you might want to. Again, this is very far in the distance, but just to show you what you could potentially do. Then you can switch Cancelo to Trent, assuming you have 2 free transfers. That's going to cost you absolutely nothing. You can bring Trent in against Andreas, and you've got Solanke against Southampton at home. All of a sudden, your team rating's 100% now, and you've got 91% game week rating for what is a blank game week, and a week where other people might struggle to field a decent team. So I think this is a really nice wildcard draft, basically. I think you've basically covered everything. You're attacking the next few weeks with the likes of your Barnes and your Maddison. You've got the likes of Zaha and Gaeta and Mark Guehi in there for the longer-term Palace fixtures. You've got, in my opinion, the best captaincy options over the next 4 with both Salah and Haaland, who I think you can captain over the next 4 weeks really, really well. And yeah, I think the team's set up really, really nicely. Like I said, do let me know down below what you think of it. And also do make sure to sign up to Fantasy Football Hub using the link in the description. So guys, there you have it. That is my Game Week 9 wildcard draft. Of course, I played my wildcard last week, but hopefully this is still helpful for those of you that are wildcarding for Game Week 9 and beyond to start to think about the players that we should be targeting. If you did enjoy today's video and it's still on less than 1,000 likes, please do drop a like on the video. We've been hitting 1,000 likes on every video, and I do massively appreciate the support. And if you've made it this far and you've not yet subscribed, consider subscribing as well. That's completely free to do as well. Until next time, guys, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.